So I've had a few attempts at this because it is a complex subject, but councils are apparently begging Rachel Reeves for the power to implement unlimited taxes or tax hikes ahead of the next budget, alongside, get this, the option to kill off the single person discount. Think about this. This ties into the rollout of the goals of Agenda 21. I don't know about the rest of you, but I know a number of people over the last few years who their significant other, their husband or their wife, has died, and they have chosen to stay in the same abode. After all, they got it together, they worked hard to make it their own, and they may or may not have had children in the past, and they've maybe flown the nest, but the point is they can afford to run the house. It's their home, yeah? And then, what was it, 10, 15 whatever years ago, or publications like The Guardian would say, start using the term house blockers. And then you're like, well, what's that all about? And they would just point out, like, a young family would be better suited for those accommodations. That way every room is filled and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. And it's all communism on steroids. But then you add to that just the ability to, whether you own, remember, or rent, that the size of property, and remember, in many instances, it doesn't have to necessarily mean it's the size of the property. It just happens to be apparently where it's located and what is perceived to be worth, yeah? And God forbid you've got a bit of greenery on that land, or you know, your property, a decent-sized garden. Oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to pay through the nose for that in council tax, even although, you know, is it costing any more for the council to service said property? No, not at all. But apathy of the many. But you are seeing an awful lot of properties up for sale that would not normally be for sale, or are up for sale and would have normally been snapped up like that, and they're sitting there. Yeah, I am hearing more and more people looking to have options abroad who can afford to be in that situation. An awful lot more. Although I would say they're still kicking the can. But no, they're fairly convinced that they will be completely untouched by what's happening in the UK by just moving elsewhere. Many of them may have been involved in the systematic destruction of Western nations, you know, playing their part through things like Theosophy, Freemasonry, Eastern Star, the Third Sector, civil society. I mean, it's an endless shitshow list of underling occultist groups and networks that most of the population, and certainly most of the alternative media, never touches, that would be, well, I would say advantageous for the population at large to start realizing what they're actually dealing with. It's a complex subject, one that you could obviously go into more detail, but so many local councils came up with a cutting plan to balance the books. What they did was to borrow tens of billions in order to buy offices and other commercial property. The idea was that they would use the rental income to finance the repayments on the loans. They use to the surplus to fund the council's budget shortfall, but many of them did this just before COVID, blah, blah, blah. I'm not necessarily agreeing with this comment, even although it's had a lot of thumbs up. I'd say it's a lot more complex than that, and it still goes back to things like Freemasonry, Eastern Star, blah, 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 variations on the theme. You know, because fellow connected brothers and sisters would get preferred contracts and then not necessarily deserve them. So yeah, vast amounts of money wasted in that alone. And that's only a fraction of the shenanigans I would say that many of them are involved in. So the civil servants in my local council are overpaid and underworked. Why should I pay more council tax for their pay and pension? That's the real reason why they want unlimited tax hikes. Well, I'll repeat, many of them within these councils have, you'd be surprised, have options abroad, property or whatever else. And even although their own, where the council they work, the area, the city, the town, whatever else is turning to shit in a basket, well, while they're making out like bandits, they have, well, thoughts and not that far away of going to, or retiring, or are looking to go to other, what they've been told is safer places. It's a complex subject, but until people start looking at councils and parliaments and whatever else and ask yourself the question, which I think is a fair and reasonable one, are they members of occult societies? Once that was made public, once the people could see that, well, wait a minute here, yeah, then much more would become clear about why it's happening, yeah? And I'll speak to you soon.